We're going to start with, one of the reasons I switched to this kit is because it comes with these 12 different palette colors, which are really nice. Even this one that appears to be white has a little bit of tint in it. Everybody has different undertones to their skin, but your colors are going to skew cool or warm or neutral. If you know what your undertones are, you know how to do some of those corrections faster, and also how to match your foundation better. So if you've ever put a foundation on or seen it on, it looks a little yellow on someone or it looks a little orange, it's because they have the wrong tone to it. So if you notice on this palette, you have pretty obvious super light, much darker foundation colors, but some of these foundation colors actually are very similar. The tones are a little different. They're going to be warmer or cooler. And if you're not sure, the best way to do is test them out. When I was working on this head yesterday, I actually thought this darker tone was going to work, and it looked almost gray on her. Her tone actually ended up being a combination of these two, and what I like about Krylon, if you figure out the proportion to mix these, you can actually send your proportions back to the company and they'll custom blend a foundation color. So while if you were a performer and doing a show 7 days a week, through that pretty quick, but you can send in to Krylon and they'll replace any of these as an individual kit. It also gives you that ability to mix between them a lot faster. You always want to start with a clean face, and the last thing you want to do with your clean face is either put on a layer of moisturizer and then let it sit and get everything prepped, because that moisturizer is going to sit on your face. It's going to make the skin a little more supple, and it's also give you a slight barrier. The other thing you can obviously use is a primer. It's a barrier between your skin and the makeup. So especially if you're putting makeup on and taking it off, you really want to make sure you have a moisturizer or a primer layer in there. It's going to help it come off. It's going to help it move around a lot quicker. If you notice, they come in these nice wedge shapes, and this is true for any makeup application. You're going to be able to bend these to what you want them to do a lot easier. Beauty blenders are also really great. I tend to use beauty blenders, but you can just wash them so you're not tossing them all the time. You're going to lay in a nice foundation layer. So I'm going to coat her face fairly quickly, getting underneath that eye, very nice and clean. Make sure you get all the way around the nostril, under the lip, and then pull it down and around onto that jawline and a little up into the hairline. The other thing I tend to do is cover the lip a little bit because it's going to give a nice base. The next thing I want to look at is figuring out the planes of my face. Well, we need to figure out what moves on our face, right? We have this giant mandible where it hinges in at the zygomatic, where those big planes on our face are. If we know this is a giant frontal ridge right here, the part that protrudes, if we start from the top, is this forehead. So a traditional stage face, they highlight this part of the forehead. It's one of the first things I tend to skip because I know very few people who want to emphasize their forehead. Other planes that come forward are those cheekbones, nasal bone with lovely cartilage on the bottom, your nostrils sticking out from the side, your chin that protrudes, and then this jawline. This comes into play. This is what I call the Disney factor. So especially when you're dealing with a masculine face, you tend to emphasize that jawline to make it protrude even more, because Disney's taught us that we all want those giant jaws because that means you're a strong, great guy, whatever. And soften it by changing the angle of that line. You can define it more. All those things are manipulable. The other thing we tend to do a highlight right above that brow line right there, right, to help this protrude forward because we have that nice ridge at the top of the orb socket. Other thing that's great about this palette, so her foundation color is down here. I'm going to actually go fairly far to my highlight. So my highlight's going to be that 406. You never want to add straight white to it. So it's just going to make you look really ashy. And the same way when we go to do our shadows, if you're starting out with somebody or yourself that dark, you're never going to use straight black for your low light because the same thing, it's just going to make them look ashy. You can take this and add some black into it. For example, this head was mostly this, like 80% this with a little bit of that. I use this for my straight low light, and even because she was really warm with her undertones, this felt a little ashy. So I think if I were to do it again, I'd probably take this and mix a little bit of this with my black to kind of warm up those undertones. A little bit is figuring it out as you go. You get faster as you get used to it. I usually start with my highlights and I work from the top down, because that way you don't drag your wrist through it. I'm going to do this forehead highlight. You can decide if you want to do it for yourself or eliminate it. I'm just going to lay them in. It's going to be a little aggressive because we'll do all the blending second. I start with my highlights. Some people like to start with their shadows. It's a little bit of a dealer's choice. The next one, straight down the center of the nose. I tend to stop right above the little end bit, and then the nostril on either side. Right above that temple. So usually right where that eyebrow peaks, because if you're looking at someone's head, right, you're going to see where that light is hitting. Your finger right above your eyebrow, you can usually see where it's going to hit. And I usually do it as an L shape, in a reverse L, almost like bracket. And the cheek, so same thing, when you're looking at your own face, you want to put that highlight right at the top of the bone. And when we do the low light, we want it right under that bone. Really far forward, almost at the apple of the cheek, and straight back, and it fades out towards the back. And the chin, again, it's that little arc. And then the jawline, cheat up ever so slightly. Let's see, oh, what did I forget? My brow. Boop. So this brow, it's usually right underneath where that temple one is. It is a continuation of the line. I'm going to start with that 39 on this lady for my low light. Your temple is going to be a little further back. I usually leave myself a fair amount of a gap for that. So your brush, when you're charging it up, if you leave your brush nice and flat, it gives you a little more control over it. So going right up the side, pull that up into the brow a little bit. Don't overdo it because you're going to blend up. So the chin, my subject does not move, so it's really convenient. I tend to start my low lights a little further back, maybe like a finger width. Under that chin, so right where this chin comes down, and right under that jawline. And I tend to stop it a little short, and when in doubt, pull that line down. Just like on my skin, I can tell where I didn't get foundation in there, so it's not wanting to blend as well. We have these wedges, nice and spongy, right? Turn it into the shape you want. I'm gonna blend all my highlights and then blend all my lowlights. So you're gonna grab your highlight and twist and blend up. Don't over blend, because you can always come back. Once we powder and set this, you're gonna lose another 5 to 7% of intensity. And you also want some of that intensity so you still see those features. Temples, we're going to twist and pull both up and in towards the center of the forehead, leaving a little bit of that hard line. Same with the nose, I blend up and I blend down, but you're leaving it fairly straight. Cheek, I'm going to grab it and blend up and back and front. Grab it and blend up. Same thing for the chin. Grab it, blend down. Now, if you're ever working on yourself, this is the one thing where you really want to check in the mirror to see if you end up missing. Flip, find a new clean space. We're going to go and do all of our low lights. This is one of the low lights that I tend to actually use my brush. The blending is going to be at the bottom, a little heavier at the top. Asking her to look up. She's very compliant. Take a look at her and see what we see. A good distance to see. And this is a pretty good highlight and low light for a small stage. If it was a big stage, I'd probably say go bigger with these. You're trying to emphasize what's naturally already there. Now my next step is the blush. I think having one option or even four is usually not enough. I actually think this lip gloss palette does a pretty good job when blending. If you charge up your brush, you really want to charge it until you get lots of color on the end of that brush. Then the most important thing is to knock that color back down into there and then tap off any extra color off over your wrist. For the shape, I usually start almost up by that temple and make a C shape and go forward. I break that line over that highlight in the shadow. So my highlight's right there on her. I actually cheat it so it goes right through that line, and I go through the highlight and get a little bit of that. And I start that C shape here in the apple of the cheek because you don't want it to feel like a roundness here, but this is going to bring a little bit of life back into the face. I'm going to switch to this less hot knock in my color, knock it off. If I do have this, and even when I don't, I tend to create a little bit of that shape through here, through the end of the nose, through that chin, and then through the jawline. And what that does is it helps kind of bring those highlights together with that face. It's going to bring a little bit of color back into the face. The blush stage face is going to feel a little hotter than you're going to traditionally do for a street face because you want to make sure you have color. So lights are going to hit you, and those theatrical lights are really intense, so they tend to wash out all the color in your face. So you have setting powder, and it's this translucent color. It should be pale enough for everybody. It tends to be a little pale if you have darker skin. Same thing. Hopefully you're not making a mess like I just did. You're going to charge up your brush, knock it back in, and then knock it off. So you can either use the brush for all over, or you can use that powder puff. I'm going to use the powder puff. You're really going to want to charge up that puff, rub it into that puff. And I usually rub vertically and diagonally. And again, you're going to knock off all that extra powder. And I usually knock it off straight to the back of my hand because it's also a quick way to pick it up. And then you can go and really blot the face. For a lip, kind of a good rule of thumb, and I'm using a really dark lip liner so you can see it. Think about it like connect the dot. I usually go the top of the divot of the lip, the bottom of the divot, and the top again, and then your outer line. Lip liner is not to be skipped. Has a heavy wax in it. So the binder in the lip liner is much heavier than your lipstick. And what it's doing is it's creating that nice barrier. So when you put a lipstick on, it's not going to bleed to the outer side of the lip. If you line your lip, you're going to grab that top edge and also draw and pull it down ever so slightly. She's going to be very 90s with her lip color being this dark. And what that's going to do is give you an even better barrier to work on top so your lip color can really just live on there. You don't have to worry about getting that bleeding edge. Other thing you're going to want them to do is put on some clear chapstick and really get your lips moisturized so you're not dealing with all that dry skin. And I'm grabbing that lip liner and pulling it down. You usually want a nice neutral color. And if you ever want to figure out your basic lip color, if you bite your lip and let that color rise to the top, that's going to be your nice neutral. And you always want to make sure you grab that whole lip liner color and you're dragging it in. You always want to bite this way to get that middle lip. You're going to give it a kiss. That's going to take any of that extra lip color off, so it doesn't cake in, so it doesn't get on the suit of her leading man. If we're doing a male face, we still want to do lip color. It just wants to be that real base color. Basically, if you bite your lip or that inside of your lip, this has a black on one end and a brown on the other. If I'm looking at her eyes closed, I'm going to line this whole lip. If you grab the outside of your eye and pull out slightly, that's going to give you a better liner line to go with. If you start all the way down and float it, I'm going to exaggerate ever so slightly. You're going to pull it all the way down into this corner and you're going to float it across the top here. And this is for a big stage. And then the bottom eye, you do about half the eye. And you're going to float it out to the side, because what you can do right in this corner, you can take a little bit of white and get that corner. If you add a little bit of white there and a little bit frame from that tear duct. When you open the eye up, it's actually going to make your eye appear wider on stage, that whole part of your inner eye. Sometimes you'll see performers will drag that white in a little bit or out. Mascara is one of your first things to go bad, and when in doubt, throw it out. The best way to test your makeup is to actually smell it. If it smells off, toss it. If you smell it and you're like, I think it's okay, but I'm not sure, if you hold it next to your eye for a little bit, like 3 or 4 seconds, if your eye starts watering because it reacts to it, that's the sure sign you don't want it living on your lashes, so toss it. Stand across the room and look in a mirror and get that double distance, because nobody sees you closer than 20 to 50 feet away. And then you're gonna go, oh, I just lost all my highlights and shadows, and you know what, you can go back in and really pop forward. If you want to make a really defined brow, this is time you can go back in and kind of brush in some of that brow color. Once you get it down and start putting it on over and over again, it goes on in about 5 to 10 minutes. You can just go, and it's your basic face.